Romans, having built nearly all their troops that they could build in that first recruitment phase, there's not a lot of mobilization possible. Yeah, Hispania is used up, Italia is used up, Gaul is used up, this is Alpine Narbonensis. There's nothing over here. So, we're picking, Sicily, I think, is used up. Yeah. Interestingly, the chart for this era, Rhodes can build a navy, but they don't have any heavy infantry. And I'm going to say that they just have the right to build a fleet without sacrificing a heavy. That may actually be covered in an exception, but I doubt it. However, instead, Cicero built himself some archers there, as Pompey built some over in the Baleares. We built some supply wagons as well. You're limited by the number of leaders. Rome needed to, Pompey needed to build one over here. And Crassus, I think, built a couple of them in order to help them push against the Parthians. But not a lot of forces coming in. The navy that Crassus built got placed on the board. Most of the leaders got replaced. Only one didn't make it. One Gallic leader didn't make it. And I guess we're ready to rock into June. Random events, not too much excitement. We have some more weather events. Ends up the same as last time. A net of, I think, +2 on the next roll. Less die rolls, but still using the same chart and the same modifiers as when everybody was playing. That doesn't change. Still struggling along. I've made a couple of abortive attempts here to try to figure out what can I do with the Gauls. Pompey, at this point, just has to survive. If either Crassus or Cicero is gone, he's in a victory situation. Now, Crassus has a harder job in front of him. Cicero just has to live. So a Roman faction has a very good chance of winning here. Now, this is an interesting thing. So the victory conditions here are not stated, and this is why there's confusion about this. They're not stated. They're this list of things, and there's no statement of the game ends when you get the victory condition, except if Gauls or Parthian Media achieve their condition at any time, the game is over immediately. Any two Roman players can declare a joint victory at any time. I think, by a strict interpretation of this, and yeah, there's nothing in the general rules that says this happens, if the Romans don't declare a two-player victory, they have to finish the scenario out. For good or ill, they can't declare a single-player victory, and that makes sense, except that their goals are all be sole imperator. But yeah, they could try to wipe out, their contenders there. The reason this is important is because if we look back to earlier scenarios, the two earlier, Marius versus Sulla doesn't have any automatic victory conditions. And somebody pointed out, hey, it's over because somebody met their victory conditions. There's no rule that says that. There's a tendency for these scenarios to do this. And then the next one actually does specify the game ends when one player I'm pretty sure. Let me make sure there's not a rule that says the game ends when somebody meets their victory condition. But I'm pretty sure because some of them require that multiple people make their victory conditions to end the game. Other than dissolution, sometimes the scenario description will indicate a way that the game should be ended when one or several players have met them. So I'm taking this as if there's only a single Roman imperator, it doesn't matter what he's done. He has to play it out. For the whole game. And of course, trying to avoid playing these games out is one of my goals, because although in some cases you could just say, yeah, it's pretty clear. Where it's not just charge forward and ram into each other, I'm left with, God damn it, what do I fucking do? That's often the case in this game. I feel as handcuffed as maybe I first did when I first started looking at war games. I've never I don't remember many games that make me feel that way. That may be a sign that there's a very good game here, but it's very frustrating to me, and it's beyond me to find that game. You know, I mean, if I send a small force within striking distance of Pompey, he kills it. If I send a large force within striking distance, well, then it becomes the supply question. So that's what we have to gather up, is some way of getting, oh, actually, striking distance of Pompey is God knows where. I don't know if I'm legitimate there. I thought I was sitting on a port. That force looks pretty questionable, actually. I better pull it back. 3, 7, 11. I don't know. I got to count it. 12, 13. I don't know. It may not be very big. It looked bigger than it is. All that angst. And I mean, it's not the angst alone that's keeping me away from the game. I've got a lot at work that's really killing me here. And so, you know, my mornings, first thing I do is instead of coming up here and playing for an hour, which I usually do, you know, before I start work, I'm just like, I have to deal with all my emails and everything, because I'm going to be, during my actual working hours, I'm going to be like focused on the things I have to get done. So, and it's killing me. It really is. But anyway, all that angst, what happens, the Gauls inch forward a little bit, you know, like this force. We're still in supply from the fleet. We have to kill something, though, or make an attack. So we make an attack here. That was successful. We did lose an infantry doing it. And that shifts us over to the Romans. And of course, the Romans are particularly painful, but it's kind of neat because by doing them in segments, I force myself into a situation where, hey, I start with Pompey, and once I get through him, well, Cicero's pretty easy. Crassus is tricky, but I'm stuck having to do them because they're all linked together. I mean, I agonize with one side. The other side is agonizable too. Pompey here, I'm filled up here at Narbonensis. No, once I'm at the coast, I'm fine. But right now, I'm not at the coast. And I'm getting close to being within striking distance of the enemy. I got to hold this because of a supply wagon that I'm building up. But it's getting very, very hard for me to feel safe. A force like this could strike out at me. Now, it's not very strong, so I'm not too worried about that. But if the wagon starts coming close, I'm in danger. Right now, I think I'm okay. I can't find an attack I can do. I could start marching some cav up here and try to raid, you know, and seize things, you know, way up there. I don't feel like that's likely to get me much. This is mine still, I believe. And moving forward with something like this, I'll be moving within his zone of godliness. I don't have, with Pompey, a supply wagon yet. Brutus here, he might want to shift over with Pompey and see if we can, because we're going to have to fight. The Gauls are going to push towards me, and I'm going to be forced to either give up ground or fight them. The question is where I want to make that stand. Now, if I abandon this, the Gauls could sweep in and take all of Hispania from me, and then I'm just hosed. So I feel like Brutus should get together with Pompey and try to present a singular front. The problem right now is, yeah, well, I can't. I don't have ports over here. So until I get the wagon there, they're not really close enough. But let's get Brutus moving here. Of course, the danger is this guy could come down. So he's 3, 6, 9. No, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, basically. Hey, you know, forces could go take... Is this important? Not particularly, so let's run away. and we'll move Brutus out of the way. Because I can lose a couple of towns down here. Of course, if I lose 2 of them, he's got a supply source. But if he comes down into port region, he had better have his wagon and his whole force with him, because otherwise all of Pompey slams in there. All the Roman factions looking to dissolve do nothing. Pompey, a little bit of shifting here. Cicero shifts up to Cisalpina. If the Gauls come down for an automatic victory, like if they defeat Pompey, I had better have a force here. I can always shift things down, and actually we kind of have a deal with Crassus. He's going to start shipping his forces over into Syria. However, he doesn't have the supplies built up yet, so he's delaying for a turn rather than marching out. What does Parthian Medea do? Yeah, well, they also will start dissolving. They have a few more points than Crassus does, right? Crassus is at 71 at this point. Cicero is at 85. Parthian Medea, because they had some victories, is at 106. But they kind of can't dare go here, because this is in range, I think. Range being kind of variable based on, do you make your forced march, but ignore that for a moment. Well, no, the forced march just kills a unit. 2. I think this is not with Rhodes. 3, 4, and that would be as far as we get. If we could get 3 more movement points, which Cassius can, there's a problem. So this isn't just an easy little raid space. And now we're stuck in the, well, who's going to lose their morale first? This is hard to hit because deserts have absolutely 0 supply faction, which means you can only get to them with a supply train if you're going to attack. You can run through the desert, but you can't fight in the desert. Which is a little weird, but, you say, it's not like fights are quick or anything. You have to decide to build a camp and eat your food and everything while you're there in a way that you don't have to do if you're just moving through the desert that month. You can move through the desert for a month with no problem, but if you're going to have a combat during that month, you're dead. It's one of the quirky things. I think we're all fine here. Let the Romans starve. They've got to come after me. Or not. I don't know. Because they've got a less morale. So if they don't figure out something to do, we're not going to have to do anything. But maybe they have something sneaky, like a civil war going to happen, where they can start getting points off of Cicero. In which case, Parthian Medea could be so low that they're going to have trouble facing, actually operating. But they should both be going down at the same rate, 5 per turn. So let's pass here too. Hey, it makes the game easier on me, right? I'm mistaken in terms of remembering a rule, basically, but I made a fool out of myself on this. I make a fool out of myself often, but that's not. The limited intelligence rule is actually a part of this, which means you don't know what an enemy stack is. You only know the top value on it. That's going to significantly change how the game is played. Because if you can't calculate exactly what's going on, you can't know. Now, what does that cause? Well, for solo play, it causes real problems because if I do have any limited intelligence, the way I play it, I walk away, etc. Well, for my kind of play, for multi-session play, where the sessions are really tiny, honestly, like sometimes 1 player turn, which means essentially for that kind of play, which obviously, the designers have no control over how you actually play the game, right? Whether or not you're doing it at one sitting, or whether it's going to be something where, you come in, play a turn, and then go away for the day, or play one player phase, and go away, and somebody else comes in and takes care of their player action or whatever, They have no control over that. So there's an assumption of how you play. And any games with hidden information have this issue where walking away for any length of time changes the game significantly just because of your physical absence. But let's assume we're just sitting there playing, etc. It still more or less means you have no idea what you're facing, beyond, you know, your knowledge of what the forces overall are. So we're not going to have all this pre-counting going on anymore, at the very least, which probably means decisions will be worse than they usually are. You know, I remember this rule when I played opposed, in the sense that I remember people just kind of like, well, I guess I got to attack. And if you've got to attack, you might as well attack with everything. And I think it's going to decrease the interest of the game as a game, but make playability a little better, because all that calculation is going to be halved now. You don't have to do it. You don't have to pre-calculate it all before you strike. You just kind of look and say, I think I got it, you know. And you kind of have the size of the stack. Of course, the holding boxes, you can't spread them out and sort them where it's usable. You're going to have to put everything in one big stack, which kind of negates the reason for a holding box, right? In order to hide what's in it, or maybe cover them up or something, I don't know. Whatever it is that's meant to work with it, but they obviously become a decrease, because no matter what, if I got a unit on the board, the leader, and a unit in my stack, well, I've given an extra piece of information. And the leader may not be the leader may be the most important piece on the stacks. So as another player was suggesting, that's something you want to hide in your stacks. You don't want your leader on top. You know, you don't want your stacks sorted in reasonable order. You want to put some piece of garbage that hides it on top. Boy, it doesn't, I mean, no matter what, the game has these annoying features that prevent you from, you know, operating properly. A pure holding box game would be much, much better, where you just have, you know, letter boxes and you have no idea what you're facing, and you have dummy units and stuff like that. Well, that's not this one. But it does open up the problem of how much strategic surprise there should be. And I honestly think, as a game, in terms of as a competitive game, the purely calculable game is more interesting. I think as the kind of shits and giggles that we used to play it as, which was I'd bring it in and a bunch of people who didn't really like war games would sit down and play it, because it was kind of not like a war game in a lot of ways. And you didn't have to do much. You just rammed units together, rolled dice. Oh, look, you're knocked out of the game. You can go play Titan or whatever, you know. Is better supported by this rule than anything else. Anyway, let's see if I can get some mores done here. I guess I'm in July. And yeah, I mean, this is just taking, my babbling is taking forever, but my will to play is also very, very low for this. Funny about this being brought up is I was finally kind of not enjoying, but becoming resolved towards, you know, there is something very interesting, especially in this scenario where the terrain is bad in a couple of places and a couple of players have real bottlenecks. So the scenario is not going to end like that. There is something to this kind of waiting game, playing it out, dealing with the knowledge that you don't have a good attack. If you don't absolutely have that knowledge, if you're like me, one side or the other is going, I don't know which one, because I might, if I'm playing in an opposed game, I might turtle for a while, but one side or the other is going to say, okay, fuck it, one of us has to break this, and we're just not sure how it's going to go, and try to figure out a way to ram into the opponent. Now, you know, the advantage of defense is kind of low in this game, unless you're on special terrain, in which case, you know, like rough or something, in which case, well, it gets a little higher. But, so you're still going to see the massive stack hitting along the coast. And I think it's going to be all the more so when you don't know for sure how protected you are, you know, how safe you are from the enemy, because you don't know how big that stack is. That could be a big stack of cavalry, which can run across and kill you Of course, that is not entirely unreasonable. That is invisible either, but it means that you take no chances anymore, and you make sure you have your full force. Here I was beginning to come to places where, yeah, because of supply considerations and because of the ability to intercept and stuff like that, I might be able to split up my stacks and operate a little bit more efficiently, so long as, I'm very, very careful in my calculations. Well, that's going away. That's going away, and we're back to the, yep, I think I better have my big stack. I have a good example of the effects of not being able to look. This incursion heading this way, towards Arbanesis, I can't do it. I really can't. When I calculated everything, I'm like, I can probably handle that. But now I'm looking, I have no idea how big the stack is because there could be a holding box, and there could be some duplicity here, right? So the leader whose holding box it is in could be under here. Some units could be stacked there to give me this false impression of the size of the force, and I also don't know what that is. The reality is, it's a mixture of a couple light units and a couple of legions. It could all be legions. I attack a stack of all legions, I'm screwed. I attack this stack, I'm capable of handling it perhaps. Although, oh no, I'm sieging. I'm fine. Or I just took that as a siege. I'm not actually launching an attack in this direction anyway, so that's fine. And it's perfectly reasonable that I not know something at that distance. Where the distance was me back here. Once I get into here, yeah, I'm probably somewhat confident that there's a force there of some size, but I probably don't know exact composition, etc. So the scale of the game maybe makes the hidden counters not completely unrealistic until you get close. Once you're one hacks away, I think you kind of should know, and you should be able to turn and run away or whatever. That might be too late due to interception, so, it's a level of complexity we don't want to add. What we see is the Gauls, though, are heading down here. Make sure they get their 5 points each turn, right? Or don't lose their 5 points each turn, because right now they're running out of places to attack. So they're going to launch a little attack into, the Spanish area where Pompey isn't really. And actually what that means is probably both Pompey and the Gauls are going to have forces down here jerking around. Forget about that. This scenario does not have the exception an earlier scenario had. As far as I remember, it allowed naval invasions. Yeah. I thought the special leader rules, and I would have to bring a leader, but no, I'm not allowed to navally invade anyway, so no source of points there. I don't know where I'm going to find my points. I really can't afford to get close to that, because that thing's in supply. If it has a wagon, it can hit me. So I think we just got to keep pushing here and start taking our penalties. I just found Pompey was cheating here. All in one stack, in the sense that he should have been destroyed. Now, he wouldn't have made that mistake, and he wasn't in any real threat. So I've spread him out, but I may have to actually fall back, just because this is too close a position to be in this kind of formation. These guys can support each other. Brutus, though, we're looking at an expensive 6. He'd have to roll a 5 to get there, and that's just too unlikely. So I've got to get them into a more supported position. The nice thing about this location is I'm in supply and, in the nice road position. So what may be happening is I have to build the whole stack here. And the problem with that, of course, is the movement that I've got here with this supply wagon coming up. So then I have to move my whole axis over in that direction. That may take more effort. No matter what's happening, I don't think there's an attack that's going to be possible by Pompey. So he's taking his loss of morale to the point where the morale system really starts to break down. Yeah, sure. Pompey, the Gauls, neither of them did anything. They took their payment, their effect there. Cassius, he's moving forward, takes his penalty, and he's getting down there. He's like at 66. But for Cicero, there's no hope. He has no place he can get points from within the confines of what's expected historically. He's at 85. He might be able to outlast Cassius and take over his forces, depending on what, or Crassus, depending on what happens. I have enough navy. I could throw myself in there and try to race around and grab things, but we saw how ineffectual that was. You know, we ended up losing our forces because Crassus said, "Yeah, screw Cicero, let him die." So that leaves me to the, okay, well, let's go crush into some random barbarians, you know. Why are we doing this? Not for any reasonable reason, especially given that this is supposedly Cicero, quite possibly just the orator who never led troops, well, at a major level. But yeah, and I could end up facing something random and really horrible by like attacking Raetia or something like that. But I'm really kind of left with a situation where I don't have access to the Gauls. I could move towards them, but then am I in any kind of good shape for fighting them? I'm not really in good shape for fighting anything, though, because fucking Crassus steals my troops every turn. And now I'll at least have the ones from Cisalpina. I'll look for some place I can attack. Maybe there's an island that I can hit fairly easily or something. I think we own Crete already. But yeah, it's not appealing to be in a position where, yeah, we're at peace. I mean, Rome would collapse continuously. It would always fall into, if the game tried to play where, oh, if you're not really at war with anyone, you shouldn't have to attack them. We don't have that kind of rule in place. Cicero has no one that he's got to attack or supposed to attack. Yet there are threats against the empire, so why should his forces just be dissolving right upon themselves? That doesn't make sense historically, and it certainly doesn't in this particular case. There should be a special scenario rule for this where Cicero doesn't have to attack anybody until something happens, but or whatever. I mean, you know, there are other solutions to it, but where the best solution is, yeah, Rome's in crisis right now. Let's go attack some random barbarians and piss them off. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know. Okay, so what's happening is Cicero doesn't want to go with him because if he dies, that's horrible. And stacking limitations are not good. So we're going to just march a bunch of these guys up here and into Raetia. And then we see what shows up. And the way we see what shows up is over here. I need 2 dice. It's a barbarian. It's not Caledonia, Arabia Desertia, or Sigarish. None of those are close to me, so we'll just go forward. I'm not going to face any of the big guys and hope we get something small, because otherwise we're screwed. 7, so we got a 90 morale, 428, replacement rate 3 force. That is going to get assigned, I think, to the furthest power, which will probably be, I'm not sure. It may be the Parthians, but it may be someone else because Parthia is not far from this occupied city. So I have to look up some rolls to figure out whether or not that happened. But this probably means the collapse of Cicero and quite possibly, you know, worse problems for Rome. But if he got lucky, you know, he makes his situation a little bit less horrendous. He's in this position where he's going to lose morale every turn just because he's the senatorial faction that, you know, isn't assigned some job to wipe somebody out. If he gets wiped out, that'll get us down to 2 imperators, which, remember, is one of the auto victory conditions for the Roman faction. And the results were far worse than a simple pass would have been, with a big part of Cicero's force wiped out. But, you know, if he got lucky, he got lucky. He ran into a unit here, he wiped it out, but now he's got Raetia coming in to attack, which is going to cause problems. He's lost some morale a little bit more than he would have, 6 points instead of 5, but, you know, and given points to the barbarians. The barbarians are under control of Parthia, and of course, you know, hurting Rome is in Parthia's best interests, although not necessarily hurting Cicero, who can actually affect him, but keeping that power as an effective attacking force by taking things, stripping away Cisalpina, for example. That's a worthwhile goal, you know. Actually, it's going to revert to inactivity, and it gets removed from play, and then can be reactivated and might have completely different forces. So it's not that big a threat. I could have gotten lucky and found myself something, you know, that could have given me a couple of turns worth of attacks. I'm not going to get anything great off of it. It's not going to be too terrible, but it did wipe out some of Cicero's rather piss poor tiny army. Great. Okay. And that puts us over to the Parthians. You know what? This game's easier if you don't actually do anything. The Parthians, you know, I put some thought to it, but they can't. They can't fight Crassus. I'm in a position where I can at least intercept. If Crassus forced, well, that's Cassius actually. If he forced marches, it's probably not a safe place to be. Yeah, let's get out of there too. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's safe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have problems, which is that I've got to bring my wagon train with me, and I need to keep my 2 forces together in case there's some kind of, you know, massive swing forward. But yeah, we'll let Crassus start picking things off. We'll take our 5-point morale hit and hope that somehow something happens to stop him. He's just too big. Now, we can't count him, of course, but we do know, you know, approximate size of the force, which is good enough for me. You know, I actually like it better. I don't mind I know what's there more or less, but I don't know exactly what's there, so that I can't, you know, absolutely figure out which odds table I'm going to be on. I kind of do that anyway, roughly, but in some cases, because you have this capability to, like, exactly figure out how much supply you're going to need and whether or not you can do it, that those multiple levels of calculation do really give you a big edge, and then the recounting makes sense. If you can't look, but you have a vague idea, well, then it's not too bad. You can at least still make reasonable decisions. I mean, otherwise, I might attack something that's just absolutely ridiculous, right? You know, whatever. Anyway, this is a bad situation for Parthia to be in because their morale's dropping. And very shortly, Crassus's will not be dropping, which means we kind of have to do something. What do we have to do? That's hard to tell. We can't really be within range of his main counter. We don't want to start a war within Arabia Desertia. We don't want to, you know, go running into other provinces that aren't us. This is where we can supply our force best, spread out a little bit, but maybe we're better off, you know, trying to defend in the mountains. We're not even sure which territories we own, because that's really hard to keep track of without the counters all over the place making a mess. So we have to look that up constantly. I can't think of an easy way to handle that particularly. But I'm interested, for example, what's Atropon? Is that, yeah, that is part of Parthian, so maybe I should be up there instead. Unfortunately, 1, 2, 3, 4 got me to here. My little supply wagon makes it there. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just can't make it into the mountains with my supplies. Could I send a littler force up there? Well, maybe, but then I've got my forces split, and an opportunity won't be able to present itself as easily. So we'll see what this generates, you know. The main thing is we just don't have places we're allowed to attack, you know, and we've got to give way because his big stack is too dangerous to us. So the Gauls keep inching forward. Now we're starting, because keeping the supply wagons around us. Now we're starting to have to pay supplies. I had to peel off some units because we're no longer in range of this port that's real close. But got this big unit. Almost was within range that I could force march to get to Brutus. That means that Pompey is going to have some difficult decisions to make where he has to gather his forces, or else he can be defeated in detail. Now, it's kind of iffy because, you know, Pompey himself could force march, but we got no supply wagons yet. So we got to gather and get our supply wagon and get within range where everybody can kind of intercept each other. And it doesn't help if you can intercept to a supply, you know, if your unit that's going to have to intercept has the supply wagon, because the chance of interception is so much lower with a wagon that, you know, you just can't guarantee that you're going to be able to get there if you have like Brutus here. This is why the big stacks happen. It's the only way. It's the only way to have an operable force. The other option, of course, is spread out and let somebody squish your stacks by bringing their supply wagon into play and getting victories. On the other hand, the Gauls, because they're not attacking, are getting, you know, penalties into their morale. Pompey, I don't think, has anywhere near the size force that the Gauls have. It's kind of hard to tell, but we're not going to count anymore because that's against the rules, right? We're not even really supposed to be looking at these stacks, but again, Pompey pulled back, gathered his forces. He's trying to get his wagons up there, see if he can do something. Right now, he's just looking at a defensive position more than anything else, buy himself some time to get some troops. That's something that very seldomly do you have the opportunity for in this system. At some point or another, he and the Gauls will probably reach sort of a balance, and at that point, he's got to decide, does he want to keep letting his morale decrease, or does he go after the Gauls? Right now, the Gauls can't get a grip on anything that they can attack him with. They're just going to keep closing. We'll see how that turns out, because Pompey doesn't really want the climactic battle yet. He wants to build up. He has the capacity to do so. The Gauls, you know, they have some. It's going to be years before Pompey feels like he's ready, probably. And he'd like to get this done with before the Civil War starts, for a number of reasons. Crassus over here has successfully taken this city, which means, hey, he didn't pay his penalty and actually gained some points, so his morale's up to a mighty 68. I haven't done Cicero yet. There's not much he can do. He tried this little thing against Radica. Well, now his army's destroyed. And he's not able to build troops anywhere except Cisalpina. It's going to take him the beginning of the next year before he can build additional troops. He's just going to decrease and probably collapse on his own, just under the weight of being, you know, not having an opponent. Parthian Medea, having already determined we can't face Crassus, they've pulled back. They're hoping something good happens. They can't imagine what it could be at this point, and their morale's just dropping because they've got nothing they can grab. This scenario is not turning out to be as interesting as I'd hoped, as is always the case with this fucking game. But, you know, I mean, there's some opportunity for something here. It's potential that, like, I don't know, somebody could spread out and thereby, you know, sacrifice units to the other person who can make kills easier. but maybe trick the other player or something like that. I don't really like games where it's all about, you know, did I put a real force here or not? You know, is this garbage? And especially where it's inching forward like this. Conceivably, it could all just be a shell game type game because of the hidden pieces. I could throw out, you know, some garbage and hope to attract somebody in to something that's not important, but thereby sneak my big force up. To me, that's a bullshit kind of game. You know, it's neither particularly interesting to play nor all that historically accurate. On the other hand, if you do what seems to be the natural tendency, which is turtling until you feel like you can win, well, as long as the Gauls aren't getting their own morale up, Pompey's fine. Over here, as long as Crassus can keep taking cities and force the Parthians to run away, they're going to just gain. And it's really tough for the Parthians to move forward with their force. Because remember, I'm stuck with that damn supply wagon. So I can get to here. And maybe I have to. Maybe if Crassus makes an attack on this city, I have to go in there and fight the battle, and that'll probably be the game for the Parthians. They'll probably, you know, be so knocked out that Crassus will be in pretty good shape at that point. Cicero has no hope. We're moving into the random events phase. And, you know, I mean, I wish I was playing other things, and I really don't know if I'm going to go any further on this. I had some help. Some of the later era scenarios would fix this problem. My memory of the game is they don't. Really what it comes down to is long setup time, preparing all these cards and everything for any given scenario, and then, yeah, that wasn't very exciting. You know, I mean, there's a setup. It's not like Europa Universalis in terms of the bookkeeping and the setup and everything that has to be done at the beginning. But there's just kind of the best that happens is it comes down to a random roll on this for the big climactic battle. Or it's that shell game. That shell game could be interesting, I guess, but there are much better ways to do it. Just play 3-card Monty if you want. The economic phase, not a whole hell of a lot happened. Although we had one random event of interest, which was Cicero got 150% of his income. He's got 227 bucks. If money was worth a lot in this game, he might be able to buy, say, favors off Crassus in terms of being able to build in Italy. Of course, Crassus doesn't need money terribly much. Pompey is in a little bit more financial trouble. Might be able to get some kind of agreement out of him. I didn't really look at building more supply wagons, mainly because I'd have to search through all my pieces and count how many I have. The only thing that was able to recruit anything, because Brown is out of pieces now, I guess, is the Gauls. They got their replacements. Everyone else, I think, has used up all their production capabilities. I don't know, did I do roads? Might be all of them. I'm pretty sure I built something there. I can't. Yep, I did. So yeah, not a lot to do, and it's not like the rest of the empire can produce troops because they're all B quality units, and nobody's got a B quality color mix. So this becomes just a normal turn with some rolls. I'm wondering why this guy didn't get a roll. I put these in the wrong places. Put the leader over here, and I had this over in September. So I do get a chance of getting that leader back, I guess. It's a +1, 1 or 2, he comes back. Oh, look, I gotta figure out where to put him. It's like the Gauls have gotten their grip on Pompey here, pushing forward in a position where they can all intercept into here. Now, Pompey could try to run around and get an attack, but they can still intercept. This guy has a wagon, this guy has a wagon. Not that I know that. These wagons are now threatened. Pompey's going to have to fall back, and things are looking ugly. And Gaul may well win against Rome as a whole if he can get a little bit further in here. That initial Caesar loss is turning out to be uglier than I thought. Okay, so Pompey and Cicero both kind of in the, yeah, we're just fucked position. Forgot to upgrade that. Pompey's decided to gather his forces. He's hoping to have a fight here, but it's probably going to end up in the clearing. There's not much he can do about it. He can't abandon either Narbonensis or Spain, and he's got to make a choice between one or the other. He's going to go for the lucky die roll. He's got the favor of the gods. Maybe he'll beat the Gauls in a big battle here and be able, you know, to turn the game around for the Romans and certainly for himself. Cicero, nothing he can do. He has basically garbage here. I'm not sure how much Gaul's aware of how weak he is, but, you know, look, that's not a big stack, you know. we can do that, but we have to concentrate on destroying Pompey first. And if we hit Pompey, the halving, you know, even though I mitigate that a little bit, of whatever's left, which is almost nothing, will destroy everything that is left, assuming that Pompey can gather his forces. So it's probably going to come down to a battle royale there in the clear, and that's near a port. It's not a port the Gallic forces can use until they take a second port on the Med, but they should be able to do that and be set up for a springtime campaign that will be pretty impressive. They don't really have to worry about Hispania. They're just interested in Narbonensis and Cisalpina. They've taken the rest of their victory conditions. Over here, on the other hand, it's sort of the opposite. Parthian Medea, I haven't taken them yet, but they have trouble facing Crassus. And so now Cassius is moving forward. It's not one big stack, but it's effectively the same. You can spread out a little bit to march, and then, you know, unspread out when battle comes. It's pretty easy to intercept. And the supply wagon is up here. There's actually a backup supply wagon there. So Cassius's forces, or Crassus's command as a whole, looks like it's in pretty good shape. We rolled for the revolution, or the Civil War, there was only, you know, a 1 in 36 chance this time. If that, yeah, I think there was. Because of the penalty of, so there's 2 points for this, a 3-point penalty for Caesar. The 2 points were for the turns. You don't think there's a point for Galicia, though, so maybe it was impossible again this turn. I don't know. But it wasn't the 12. And now, let's see if Parthian Medea can think of anything to do about this. I mean, you know, if Crassus split up his forces and tried to do something clever, like take more of Parthian Medea at once, yeah, then they could slip in and do something. But as long as they stay in one general big force, what are we going to do? Especially because things are really channeled through here. You know, I could go up here and try to bring something like Armenia into the war or something, but again, that doesn't do me any good. So the Gauls trigger the grand battle. They move into here. Pompey can intercept them automatically, as can the other command, but there's reasons to withhold some troops and whatnot. All of them are in there. The reason they can intercept is, first of all, they're in supply. They don't need to bring their supply wagons. They're in supply off the ports. That was what I didn't realize. The Gauls have to bring their supply wagons with them, but that's fine. They had range to get them all in. One of them maybe didn't. I think I cheated one of them. I got to figure out where he came from. 2, 5. We'll see whether or not I needed both, because I'll force march if I needed both. I think it's just an extra movement point. Although my gut instincts are about right for the numbers, they're a little less than I thought. No, I can't think properly. We're going to be on the 3-2 table. I thought I had maybe 2-1 here, but Anyway, whatever. We'll leave that be. Let's see what our odds end up being then. So the Gauls have some advantages too. Pompey's good, but there's some advantages for the Gauls. So I think Pompey's going to try to kill himself. He has a +1, so he can't actually do it. Should the Gauls pray? Yeah, we'll pray with the Gauls too. Red die for Pompey. So Pompey is going to get 2 dice, 2 points in his favor. It's 1 point though in the Gauls' favor. So right now, Pompey's got a +1. Or 1 in his advantage. CERs. I wish I had like a little thing to compare them all the different modifiers. Brings us up to 3. Actually, Pompey's got a shot here, a pretty good shot here, even though he's got the numerical disadvantage. But we'll get to it. Terrain. That gives him another one. The surprise advantage. The one that I never remembered as being part of the game. However, and 1 more for leadership. Brings him up to or to a -5 on that 3-2 table. Yeah, it's 241 to 151. It's really close, and that's why I didn't want to force march that wagon in, and I didn't, because it could have been close enough that I absolutely needed, you know, every last point for the Gauls. I couldn't afford to lose a 2-point infantry or something. On top of that, though, the Gauls have cav and archer advantage. But that brings it down to a -3. This is not good. On 3-2. It's just a single die. Why am I rolling 2 dice then? That gets me a 1. No effect. The defender won, which means 2 victory points go to Pompey, and the Gauls fall back. Both sides gained troop points. The Gauls, I think, gained 23 due to seasoning, and I think it's about 8 for Pompey. So if we add 23 here, that brings us to 264, but 8 here, he's still not going to be high enough to get to the 2-1. So nothing too exciting happens out of that. Now, that no effect, as far as I'm concerned, that's not an unreasonable result in this. You can't see it as they had a pitched battle and nothing happened, basically. What happens is there are times when there were standoffs in these kind of battles, and both sides pretty much turned around and walked away. Not necessarily right in front of a battlefield. Sometimes they maneuvered about and just couldn't get a grip on a place where both sides could agree to fight, but neither side could really outmaneuver the other guy. So a lot of the kind of larger scale operational, well, smaller scale operational type actions, you know. The board has kind of an operational field to it already. A lot of those operational type strategies are all kind of abstracted in here. Commander's decisions not to press as hard as you like. All that kind of stuff is in here. And then, you know, there might be some skirmishing going on. Probably there would be some losses, but there's two facets to defending why no losses are recorded. One is some of the losses might be recovered. You know, additional troops coming to the front, etc. The recruitment time for big forces isn't really all that accurate, and you're going to have stragglers and troops not making it to the field and everything, no matter what is happening. But another way of looking at it is just they're kind of too small to deal with. Now, the reality is that there probably are some losses that impact both sides, but at the scale this game is at, it's hard to really justify them as worth tracking. because the amount of rules that would be necessary to kind of handle what would happen in these close situations. It couldn't just be a couple units die on each side or something like that. It's got to be something that makes a little bit more sense based on the proportion and size of the forces involved. So, you know, if two small units crash to each other, both is effectively still there. But if these big armies kind of are skirmishing across a hex side, or a hex, and, you know, taking attrition and everything as well, well, there's probably a significant effect in terms of what shows up in the counters for the game, but there's no, it's not worth tracking those couple of counters, and that would have been killed by that. The one thing that it does is yes, I lost 2 morale points, victory points, morale points. You get them from victory, right? Yeah, you lose them from lack of victory. Those 2 points are less than what I would have gotten for not fighting, and they're less than what the Romans would have gotten for withdrawing. This ended up a close enough fight that it really kind of is, yeah, both sides are, you know, gambling on the even dice here. For Pompey, I would have rather pulled back and gotten more troops, you know, next year or whatever, but I can't afford I can't afford to give up either of these, Narbonensis nor Hispania. If I give up Narbonensis, there's a chance Gaul could just win by crushing into Cicero. Pompey can't afford to fight here on the attacker. Yeah, maybe he's not too disadvantaged, but that would be a 2-point swing in terms of the modifiers. We just can't risk that. We've got every incentive in the world to hold out for a while, and we have a fairly high morale. Cicero, on the other hand, does not have a high morale and has been piddling for too long. He's marching off, trying to get himself in a place where maybe he can hit, is this 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He could capture this next turn, and then be in a position where from there he can, like, maybe start striking into Gallic regions and cause more trouble for the Gauls next year. Next turn is the last possible summer turn. We really don't want to take another 5-point hit where we're in the low 60s now. Over here, Crassus, interesting choices here. He moved Cassius up the front. Now this is dangerous because he has to succeed in a supply wagon interception if the Parthians attack here. Now what's that interception going to be? It's a 1. He's got a +1. That would be pretty easy normally, but a -3, so a -2, which means on a 1 or a 2 he'd fail to intercept. And then the backup force behind him probably doesn't bring its wagon, but tries to intercept as well. This might be the time for the Parthians to try to fight him. They could have intercepted, if they intercepted here, a forced march could have gotten the wagon there. It might have been wise to put the wagon there to begin with. They did try to intercept this last unit, start wiping out, you know, his reserves from behind and catch him from behind. And that's kind of the thing. If you take it slow and easy and carefully, you start taking morale hits for not capturing cities quickly enough. So it does get, it kind of puts the pressure on Crassus that you'd want to see on him. And he succeeded in taking that city with no problems. And now we go on to the Parthians. They do not want to attack where there's a supply wagon, but they may just want to attack here. But here's the thing. They don't know. Theoretically, they don't know where the supply wagon is. There could have been a forced march that got that supply wagon there. And that's kind of the problem. If you're playing this with the hidden pieces, the Parthians can't take a chance on anything that they attack, right? They have to just keep falling back and giving up. But if you play with the knowledge, then this becomes, with open knowledge of what there is, this becomes a viable choice. and one which may just save the Parthian cause. Now, chances are it will mean a Parthian defeat. But what can you do, you know? I mean, that Parthian defeat seems obvious right now, as long as Crassus can advance at a kind of slow rate. Parthians were not safe. They made their charge, they got intercepted, but that makes them not the attacker. They have plenty of cavalry. They can leave if they want. I think they take 10 points of hit for that because they wouldn't have declared an attack. And they get a 5-point, I'm not sure, getting intercepted may count as your attack. And they get a 5-point hit for withdrawal before combat. I'll have to look up whether they take just 5 or 10 for this if they withdraw. But here comes the question then of do you know the numbers or not? Once again, you know, I made the attack at all with kind of the thought of, yeah, I know the numbers. But in a sense, I don't have to know the numbers to know that I can probably get out of there if I'm intercepted. Whether or not that's worth the risk, well, I got to take risks at some point. It's pretty obvious that I'm not going to be able to win this campaign unless I can start picking these forces off and defeat them in detail. So, either way is a fair assumption for this. If I'm not counting, I'm running away. But if I count the numbers and they come out pretty good, maybe I stay. Maybe I fight this battle. I don't know. It doesn't seem wise, but here's the thing. I got nothing left. If I can get a result that causes some casualties to both sides, that would be good. On the other hand, what I don't really know, if I don't count, is a whole bunch of Crassus's troops are green. Hey, they're almost all green now. A whole bunch of them are green troops, and fighting is just going to make his army better. Relevant rules seem to indicate something kind of interesting. The first one is our 3.4 here, and this is the rule that I'm not sure I like. You can't look through a stack of another player's units unless both sides have units in the same hex. Ah, okay, so we know it. Great. And I don't know if retreat before combat affects the attack requirement. Oh, shit me. I don't know. I gotta find that. To me, like interception, running from an interception means, yeah, you're gonna take 5 points for running, and if you didn't make any attacks, and I didn't make an attack here, unless I get to win the battle and then declare the siege, I'm gonna take a 10-point hit on morale for that. Now, whether or not these are known, I'm already down to 91. How much longer, you know? The numbers aren't good, though. 226 to 141. 70 more to here means it's going to be a 3-2 base. Leadership, both are +2 leaders. Quality, yeah, I don't know how much of my strength is in cav and how much is in infantry. Crap. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 60. 2, 3, 4, 5. 93. So the majority is in cav. So it's 3-2. One in his favor so far. However, I have, I think, the cav advantage. Yep, barely the cav advantage. If I may have screwed up over here and counted cav and archer both for the Gauls. I think I did. They should have been penalized one more. Yeah. Can't go back and fix things. Over here, all of these are, everything's an archer. So we definitely have the archer advantage, but that ends up being a 1. So we're looking at 3-2 at even. We're the defender. I'm going to take it, I guess. Hey, it'll end the game quicker, right? Both sides are not going to declare the gods. Only the Parthians are going to call on the gods because Crassus doesn't like gods. Or the other way around. So let's see if the Parthians are screwed. No, they're bonused heavily. And what did I say? It was at even. Now they're a +2. So, or -2. So it's 3-2 at -2. I think. When you throw a lot of calculation and odds, I mean the calculation's bad enough, but keeping track of all the modifiers too. I always have trouble with modifiers. So -2 on the 3-2. Let's do it. It's a good roll this time. So we wipe out the Parthians, but take half their damage, and that's probably the war in the east. One way or another. We'll see. Of course, I screwed up. This is why I should use paper, not calculators. I started counting the stacking points and lost the amount of strength points that I have to kill. I guess we'll just keep counting and then we'll recount the strength points and see what we have to kill over here. And with the Parthian Medians, oh, I screwed something up. I owe a couple of points back. Down to a 16 morale. Miswritten there. And Crassus at 142. I counted this siege that had already happened. Parthian Media is not really able to recover from this, but it does mean that Crassus has to do some stuff to pursue the war in order to make sure that, he does finally finish Parthia off. He might be best off sending Cassius over to Italy to contest that when the time comes for that, because Crassus himself is as good as the remaining Parthian leaders. Everything was wiped out. I mean, they threw everything on it, and that's the way this game kind of goes. You gather your giant army, you smash them together, and you hope for the best. And the roll of the gods didn't make up for a decent roll in the combat table. That's going to push us into the weather possible. And we might be seeing winter, in which case there's a lot of time to reposition. Crassus may want to withhold finishing Parthia off until they're in position to deal with Cicero, because finishing Parthia off increases the odds of the Civil War happening. But being able to deprive Cicero of Italy and the production that it has every turn, that's pretty damn major. Because that's the majority of the forces, and that's just something special in this scenario. Cicero is pretty damn questionable if Crassus is still in the game.